Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the STEM Files on YouTube. We are no longer, and I repeat, we are no longer on Blog Talk Radio. I am Tariq Muhammad, the Chairman and Chief Science Officer of Original Man Scientific, and your host, aka Magna Cardiac. I'm joined by my right-hand man, partner in crime, Jabril.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Jabril Muhammad, aka Jabrillion Engineer. Happy to be here, ready to get it started. Before we get into it, gotta make the honest plug. Make sure you follow us on Facebook at OMANSci. That's at OMANSCI. On Twitter at OMScientific, as well as on Instagram at OMScientific, as well as OMS_TV. This will be repeated toward the end of the show. Let's get it started, family.
All right. Thank you, Jabril, for letting everyone know. First, I want to say this is the first edition of the STEM Files where we had someone who represents the field of physics. So throughout the 2 years of being on Blog Talk, we've mainly had engineers or those who are in the life sciences. So now we have somebody that's involved in non-living matters that do not involve a particular structure, but actually just things that happen in the atmosphere or in the environment. So we want to introduce to everyone Luis Martinez. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Being here. So can you kind of just give us some brief background of yourself, where you're from, and what got you to this point?
Yeah. So I am I'm a first-generation immigrant. I spent a good chunk of my life in Mississippi. I went to, some school that probably doesn't have the same name as when I was a student. And I grew up there for about half my life. I then went on to Dartmouth in New Hampshire, where I majored in physics and math. Finished that. I took a gap year, and after that, I decided to attend Penn State University, where I am now. And I took that physics degree, and I decided to pursue physics grad school in the hopes of getting my Ph.D. in about 4 to 5 years.
Awesome. So when we're talking about physics, this is not very, and we were talking about this before the show had aired. Physics is not really a popular thing among the general community. People don't go out and talk to people. Don't walk outside their doors and automatically think about physics. So what are some of the reasons why you decided to enter into physics, and how would you like to see physics viewed among the general population?
I really wish I had an answer, like a complete answer to that question, because I ask myself all the time, and what got me into physics. I just remember being in high school and being somewhat decent at math, and I was like, okay, I'm somewhat decent at this. Let's see what I can make of it. And after a while, I sort of, went on, kind of was interested in physics, ironically also in history. And one of the things that really impressed me about it was that you sort of become, in the words of Kanye, that's pre-Make America Great Kanye,
Right.
You sort of become a god amongst men, in the sense that you know how everything works, from the smallest scale to the largest scales. If you become a physicist, you are no longer taken by surprise by what you see in everyday life. You don't necessarily have to make up an answer for why things happen. You can say, this probably happens because of X, Y, or Z. And in terms of what I would like people to view physics as, is as that gateway to really understand the universe around you. I don't know, I can speak for anyone else, but growing up in poverty, one of the things that I really hated was being ignorant of the world around me. I didn't like being in the darkness, not knowing what was going on. And physics, for that, it's sort of like a flashlight that kind of makes me make sense of the world around me. It says, this is why it happens. You don't no longer have to make up a reason for why it happens. It happens because of something we understand. So it's people who, not necessarily think they think about physics. They're doing it, sort of like unconsciously when they ask why. Even when you ask the question of like, what is blank, or what is this made out of, you're in a way thinking about physics. And the moment you start cooking up an answer for that, congratulations, it's your first step into becoming a physicist.
Nice, nice. Now, when you were talking about physics, a lot of people who may be watching this right now may not even know what physics is. So, can you kind of shed some light on that? Just give us the simplest definition that you can on what physics is.
I think, in my opinion, it's the sort of like the backbone of every other science. So you can't have chemistry without physics. You can't have biology without physics. It's sort of what makes everything go in a way. So the moment you start talking about diseases, well, you're talking about chemical reactions. You're talking about movement. The moment you talk about movement, you inevitably invite physics.
Right.
The moment you pick up a handheld smartphone, you, in a way, are, enjoying the byproducts of physics. You're talking about currents. You're talking about things moving. So I guess the common theme is change in a way. It's like, finding reasons for why things change and why they change.
Bro.
I'm so glad you brought that up because you mentioned talking about growing up in poverty and the concept of being ignorant to one's surroundings and really why one's in X predicament versus understanding your surroundings and being able to empower oneself to get out of said predicament.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with physics, once you kind of take that veil off and can start to explain phenomena, you really lose the ability to, or lose the right almost to not, cash in on or not do what you say or do what you put your mind to. So I guess how has the understanding of physics and the application of physics allowed you to understand or attack what it is that you want in life in the sense
Yeah.
that you're no longer ignorant of your surroundings and you're able to figure out what you need to do to get to point A or point B?
I think for me, physics came about a sort of as a desire to, do something about my current situation, in the sense that, I looked around me and I lived in a very poor neighborhood, but 2 blocks over, you see Ferraris, you see penthouses, and you're like, that can't just be just by chance. Something had to cause that. So for me, I was like, those people in power have something. They have knowledge. They have a mastery over their craft. So, when I think of science, I think of sort of like that, master key to all those. I think if you are a scientist, you can be pretty much whatever you want. I mean, if you want an example, look at Merkel, Minister of Germany. I think she has a doctorate in some form of chemistry, and she's guided her country through some very post-Cold War times. And the list goes on. I mean, I think, especially if you're, sort of like the core sciences like chemistry, physics, and so on, I think you sort of become a master of whatever you want. You can apply that to anything, because if you can understand how the most basic concepts work in the universe, everything else is just a special case, and I use it all the time. I used it growing up. As I said, my family wasn't too rich, but, through things that I've learned, in math and physics and, well, back then, I guess, the core math subjects, how to manage money better, how to, do something about a predicament, to the point that we're no longer in that same situation. I think at this point we live a very comfortable lifestyle, and I think we owe it to rational thought and to questioning everything around us, not just leaving things up to chance.
You said we live a very comfortable lifestyle. We owe that to rational thought. I think that is one of the most powerful statements that have ever been said on the show. Because so there's something called, and go with me here, a mystery God teacher, right? So basically what it is this: I'm gonna get something for nothing. So I can pray or I can think or I can hope for something, right? And then it'll happen by proxy or come out of nowhere. And I think what you've highlighted here is the simple concept of cause and effect, and the concept of, through thinking rationally and also thinking critically, I can see and understand the basic building blocks of my problems and the problems around me, and then through gaining the requisite knowledge base to figure out what to not only identify, but then figure out how to solve these problems, I can go ahead and do it. And I think that is such a gift that those with the scientific mind or proclivity towards science have, that really is our gift to society, is to be able to think critically and solve those core issues that we have, not giving excuses, but thinking critically and also moving forward. So that right there was so impactful. I'm glad your family is doing better from your point of view now, and you all are moving forward. So thank you so much.
I mean, I do want to clarify one thing. Yes, do we owe it to rational thought? Absolutely. But, I say that not as a sense to say that, I had the gift of rational thought, but that the idea that literally anyone can do it. Like, you look at my situation and you look at where I came from. I mean, I'm some no-name immigrant from a no-name town in Mississippi, and I finessed or otherwise worked my way through an Ivy League school.
Mm-hmm.
I try to use that as an example of not look how great I am, but look what a nobody could accomplish. So that kind of shows that there's nothing inherently special about me. The only thing that made me different was, I decided to pick up a book.
Right.
Awesome. Tariq?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things you said early on in the show was allowing physics to give you enough knowledge base where you would feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, a God amongst men.
Yes.
And I'm a kind of do what my brother did in terms, just kind of follow me on what I'm trying to say here.
Sure.
Can you kind of just describe a little bit before I even go into my question? Can you kind of describe a little bit about what you meant by being a God amongst men in terms of what you're learning or know about physics?
I think when I say that phrase, I kind of think of pre-Enlightenment times, when something happened, an eclipse, or for example, my ethnic group of Native Mexicans, when they saw an eclipse, were they wonderful at predicting? Yes, they were. Surprisingly very good at predicting when those things would occur. Did they say why they occurred? They had a lot of mythology behind it. I mean, they honestly tried it. But I think if you were a person who was aware of why it happened at that particular time, you were a god. You knew more than anyone else around you. And, granted, you might not have been all-knowing. To them, you were all-knowing. Just like, yes, a basketball isn't necessarily infinite. It is infinite to particles that are at the smallest scale. And that's sort of the flavor of what I'm trying to get at, is that the moment you know how things work and others don't, which is the current situation we live in, because I mean, if that wasn't the case, there'd be more physicists, there'd be more scientists, which that's sadly not the case. But the moment that you do, the moment that you open yourself up and you are aware why things happen, you're sort of unchained. You are different than the norm. And I think anyone can do that. I think it's not inherent to anyone.
Right, absolutely. We're taught that when you are able to completely master something, you're able to build your own reality with that mastery. So pretty much what you're saying is, if you're able to know something enough or master it enough to the point where you can use it to do whatever it is that you need to do and completely understand it and build a life for yourself using that, then you would be considered a god.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what your definition of God is, and sort of what kind of doctrine you follow.
Right.
But I think the purpose of science is for you to do that. It's to be. I mean, if you want more historical proof, a lot of people who worked in sciences during the Enlightenment, when they were called heretics, when they were insulted for questioning their surroundings, their rationale was like, hey, it's not that I don't believe in God, it's that I think there's more to the story than you're telling me. Even some of our brightest physicists, Heisenberg was a steadfast Christian who believed that, you know, there are some things that were left behind for us to figure out, and that's not necessarily a heresy, but the next logical step for our kind.
Then you mentioned something. You talked about what you believe a God is, and you know, one common held thought about their definition is one who has power and force. And correct me if I'm wrong, from a physical perspective, the equation for power is work divided by time, correct? And then the basic equation for force is mass times acceleration. So now when you begin to, like you were talking about, breaking things down into things you can understand. So work is some force you do over a distance, right? Over some time. So the more you're powerful, the more work you can do in a given time frame. So if I have an initiative and it has some mission statement, and my initial milestones or timeline has me completing X task or series of tasks in 6 months, and I do it in 2, I'm more powerful than I was otherwise. Ergo, I did said work in a shorter amount of time than I did in my initial plan or milestone. So now, see, when you start to talk about things like that, then it becomes, you can impress on people the idea and understanding of, man, that makes sense. That's logical. Does that mean I can be God-like? And then you start to pull the veil off of the mystery off of what those type of things mean. You know, same thing with force. No, a force is any type of, you know, pressure exerted on an object or whatever. So there are things that can be in a physical as well as a more figurative, you know, understanding of thought process. So just, you know, it's funny when you talk about the sciences and you weave it into the different ideologies and thought processes, you are really able to see how expansive knowledge is and how much you don't know. And really it's just like a humbling thing. So, but just out of that, my question was, so when you talk about knowing about your surroundings and like not being ignorant, do you feel that there is a want or yearning to continue to see the world, let's say, through rose-colored glasses? And if so, why?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is, you know, why would it be desirable to live in bliss?
Yes.
Is that sort of what you're getting at? I think living in bliss is, I mean, depending on who you are. Like, I guess if you're poor, you really don't have a choice. I mean, that's my definition of poverty. It's not necessarily, I mean, yeah, there's money, there's food, there's all that. But the definition, and there's one of my, you know, friends from college told me the basic definition is not having a choice. You don't have a choice. I think if you're in an adequate living condition, if you are living comfortably, living in bliss is perfect for you. I mean, why look at the world as it is? Because when you look at it, it's indifferent. It doesn't. No one's really. If you look at the universe as just as on an average, no one's special. Humanity's not special. Nothing's special. Nothing really matters in the long term of things. It's scary to think about that. It's very dreadful to think about that. But one way I sort of, you know, weave or finesse my way around that is that, okay, fine. Let's assume that everything means nothing. Fine. Believe in complete nihilism. I prefer a branch called optimistic nihilism. Fine. If nothing in the universe has meaning, fine. That means whatever I derive meaning from is just as valid as any other dogma, Christianity, you know, Judaism, you know, or any of the, you know, main religions. So I think the reason that people like it that way is because it's a lot less scary. You don't have to think about the thought. You don't have to ponder for a minute. You know, what if I'm all alone? What if nothing I do matters? But if you are able to get past that initial hurdle of like, fine, let's assume, you know, whatever religion you may believe in, fine, let's assume for a second that nothing that you do matters. Because nothing that you do matters. Derive meaning from whatever you want. Make it, I mean, hopefully make it wholesome, or make it productive. So yeah, I think it's good because you don't have to deal with the burden of, man, what if it's meaningless? What if the universe is indifferent to my existence or to what I think or to what I care about? But once you get over that and you're able to say, who cares? I'm going to live my best life anyway. I think that's, and once again, the second step. It's sort of like taking away that veil you mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Tariq?
Well, like I say every other show, when the show gets good, I tend to become an audience member rather than a host. So I'm enjoying this. But I wanna go into your education for a sec.
Sure.
And if you don't mind sharing, do you have a religious background or?
I was raised as a Christian. I weaved in and out of it as an adolescent. And one of the things that kind of made me abandon the traditional form of Christianity was I grew up, as I said, poor, not only in one area, but in two areas. And I saw people who were very steadfast, very devoted to the religion. And they were good people. And I just felt like their prayers went unanswered. And I was like, well, maybe either they're doing something meaningless or we're doing something wrong. So it's like, either way, I'm going to follow something called Pascal's wager, which says, if there's a God, you lose nothing by believing in him. Fine, whatever. So it's like, maybe the teachings of the gospel were meant to be read sort of like the way we read the Odyssey and the Iliad, or like a literature classic. So while you might not, you can take those teachings and build your life around them if you wish. So I guess as far from me, I take teachings from different branches of religion. I try to apply them as I see fit. Do I necessarily identify with any branch of Christianity or any of the other Mediterranean religions? I would probably say no. I am versed in them because I was raised Christian. I have read the Bible in two languages. So I am educated in that regard, but I have picked the things that I think are, the sort of like the model we're supposed to live by, because, people do that all the time. Nowadays they pick and choose versions of their individual religion and they try to apply it. So if it's their agenda, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to take the core teachings that say, have a fruitful life,
Nice.
How to build something.
Cool. Well, yeah, and the reason I asked that was because you made it very clear that God and science cannot be separated. You made it, well, let me put it this way. You made it a point to incorporate the idea of being a God into science.
Yes. And
it was very, very refreshing to hear that from somebody who is currently studying for his Ph.D. because oftentimes we are asked not to associate any type of religion or God or anything of a spiritual reality with science. How can you? What are some of the ways that you what are some other ways that you incorporate your spirituality with science, and how important is it to do so?
So I think the previous question was, what is sort of my religion? So nowadays it's sort of an amalgam of all these things. And I think they're all centered around the universe, that it's when you really sit down and you expect it, it is a very awe-inspiring entity. It really is. So I guess the only spirituality I have to sort of cope with is trying to figure out where the beauty of the universe manifests itself. And depending on what kind of physics, what kind of science you do, you could believe that it's in a lot of different places. I have a lot of mathematicians who believe that God speaks to them through the structure that it is mathematics. That that their spirituality lies in finding order in whatever they're trying to find order in. As far as for me, I kind of focus it on the universe came about, I came about, how I came about. I don't really care how it all started. I'll try to figure that out. But I don't pretend to have all the answers. I am religious in the sense that I'm going to try to find the answers. And that's sort of why I've abandoned the standard Judeo-Christian dogma. I feel like it would have shackled me in a way, at least just my personality. It works great for other physicists and for other scientists. Right. So I think for me, the main idea as a physicist and as a person is, look, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm not going to believe in something that tries to tell me all the answers. So I'm going to go out there and try to find it myself and let that journey be my spirituality.
Wow, that was beautiful answer. Let the and it's crazy. I have people texting me right now saying how beautiful, how well put you explain the necessity to be spiritual while you're being a scientist. Jabril, I'm just gonna pond on that a little bit.
No, it's so heartwarming when you can see and hear how you were raised in terms of your spirituality come out of someone else through conversation. And I've always felt that I've been blessed, in my studies of Islam and how we've been taught to always be able to settle on what we call the best part and see the similarities and see one on their own spiritual journey, and then when they blended and added to their scientific upbringing, what that allows them to do and think about, and how it empowers them, like we were talking about in the beginning, to do that which they set out to do. Getting into your thesis, I'm very curious as to what the basis of your thesis was, and the I guess process by which you defended it, how tough it was, and like just kind of going into that a little bit for us, if you don't mind.
Sure. Are you referring to my undergraduate thesis?
I know. Well, in your going through your bio, I know you mentioned defending your thesis and everything, and whichever one that was,
So I did one. I was never the conformist. I was like, what sounds difficult and something like no one probably has ever done. I was like, let me do 2 theses for both my majors and see how that played out. That was a trip. So I did one in math, I did one in physics. The process came about, for physics, it came about pretty early. I started in cosmology, which is sort of study of the universe, structure of the universe, when I was a freshman or so. So I started then, so kind of the idea of studying that part of physics, started at that point. And I changed advisors halfway through my undergrad, and I think the summer before my senior year, I kind of started the background of it. And I'm trying to find ways to explain the topic so it doesn't seem so esoteric. So we looked at sort of like the temperature of the universe, how it fluctuates, studying how nonlinear, and when I say nonlinear, I mean like non-simple ways certain fields in the universe behave, and how that, non-simple behavior, what we physicists call chaotic, affects the later development of the universe. And I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of computer work, a lot of code. I may still have it somewhere. And for my math thesis, which is honestly what made me want to go to physics grad school, I went into an area called topology. So we study for lack of a better term, it's a study of different spaces. How we can start from something like the real number, the natural numbers, like 1, 2, 3, so on, build from that, go to the reals, to the rationals, so on and so forth, how to build spaces out of that. And one of the emphasis was the study of time and space-time. So how do different events align each other? Like, what's the order? And the basic idea was to take a paper by Hawking, who proved a couple of theorems regarding how events are ordered and how that gives rise to, Einstein's special relativity. How to take that and say we can get a lot of beautiful mathematics if we just strip away a lot of the things that physicists need for their theories, and let's just worry about the math and see what kind of math comes out of that. And we were able to show that you don't need a lot of the extra structure that Hawking and company put on their paper, and said, we can just start with an event, we can order them, we can say very minimalistic things about the order, and outcomes, things that we sort of expect, that we see in, things like special relativity and space-time. And defending both of them was tough because they were both at the same time. So I had to sort of really find a way to squeeze every hour out of my second to last semester as an undergrad.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, was every part of this experience exciting to you, or did you have to kind of make it exciting as you went along?
I mean, it was exciting in the sense that I got to see all my hard work grow into this paper and presentation, I guess, defense. Seeing it all come together from something simple. So I think an example that I give is my code that I ended up using for simulating this early universe behavior started on as a simple code as the heat equation. So if you take a plate and you study how heat transfers over time, I started with a code as simple as that, and just adding steps along the line, it brought about something way more rigorous than I would have ever thought. It surprised me that something so rigorous could come from something really, really simple.
Okay. What? Oh, I'm sorry, Jabril. You wanted to add something?
I was just talking about, so I guess you kind of started to answer, but what was the most, I guess, rewarding and I guess most challenging or portion that you're still wrestling with in terms of your dissertation and everything, your thesis? You mentioned going from the simple to the more rigorous, but are there also some aspects that's I'm obviously, but I'm still kind of struggling with, I'm not particularly understanding this outcome or what I came up with, and kind of want to delve into that aspect deeper?
So no, I guess that'll be the short answer. Okay. By the time I presented both, I knew, I will say about at least 95% of everything that was going on. And definitely after my gap year, I understood everything that was going on. I think once I looked at the finished product, once I looked at here's what I came up with, and here's what my result implies, I was able to say, okay, this is what I want to go to, and this is not what I want to go to. So for my physics thesis, I was like, okay, I don't want to stay in cosmology. But my math thesis, because it was physics inspired, I was like, but I still want to stay in physics, specifically the area of gravity. So was there something that I still need to look at deeper? Maybe, might be rusty on it. But in terms of helping me make a final choice on what I want to do, definitely.
And I think this is such a beautiful conversation because I took the time out to not study, but kind of go over some of the things that you mentioned in your bio in terms of the, gravitational force and whatnot. I'm a medical guy, so a lot of the things that, you might talk about on the show tonight are kind of, well, I wouldn't say over my head. This is not something I kind of, dabbed into. But I really admire your passion and attachment to this, because this is, like I was saying earlier on the show, this is not a science that you just up and say, oh, I love. You have to really, really be committed to this, because this is a pure brain science. When I say pure brain, I'm talking about you have to really buckle down and study this stuff. So I want to know, where does the passion come from, other than your past? Where does the passion come from to keep going?
So where does the passion come from today?
Right.
I guess it's influenced by the past, definitely. But one thing that I want, in terms of things that make me want to just say, you know what, it's hard, but someone has to do it, is I think I mentioned this briefly towards the beginning of the show, is that I wanted to do a history major as well when I was starting undergrad. So I wanted to do physics and history. I don't know why I wanted to do that. But anyway, one of the things that I really was interested in was the story of President Kennedy's family. His father and his grandfather. His grandfather was an immigrant, came here for the famine, and you're talking about within a generation or two, their spawn was a president. That's right now we kind of just say, yeah, that was Kennedy, but I think it really warrants more awe than it gets. And as far as to why I bring that up is because Kennedy could do it, and he could go on to become president. I'm pretty sure I'm a no-name immigrant. My last name means nothing to anyone. So why not build a legacy like that? Why not reach the final step of being a god and say, well, if when I die, I'll die, and that'll be it. But not if I come up with something really novel in my field. Not if I come up with something new, something that is worth putting my name next to. For example, you'll never stop talking about Einstein, not because he's seen as one of the smartest men to walk the earth, yes, but because he has equations in him. You'll never stop saying his name because he has something that he produced. You'll never stop saying Heisenberg's names or Maxwell's names or any other scientist's name. They will live on forever. For as long as humanity can write, read, and communicate, they will live. But for as long as humanity exists, they will. So for me, that's kind of what I want. Yes, I might not be able to win that Nobel Prize. Hopefully I will. But maybe my spawn can. Maybe someone later down the line can. And they will be able to say, look, you have a immigrant coming from Mexico. His son did this, and then his grandson did that. So I kind of want to build that, sort of build a Kennedy-like legacy, but for my own family. I don't think Latin America has that as of right now. I don't think we have that Kennedy-like presence in the United States. I'm pretty sure that by the time Obama's legacy is over, he will have something like that. So I'm just trying to make sure I just want to make sure my name gets put in the history books, kind of the way Kennedy was.
You hit something on the nail a few moments ago when you mentioned that these men were the men that you described. They're notable because of what they produced. We are taught that it's really not about what you say you can do, but about what you can produce. And producers are pretty much the guys that shape realities. When you produce something, you shape realities. Point blank, period. How important is it to produce something with science and not just write to publish your research or to get your name out there? But how important is it to use your science to actually produce something that can, help shape realities?
Do you mean something tangible or something
that you can, work with and something that somebody can apply to their lives in a sense?
I mean, if you want an immediate example, you can pick up your smartphone. That's hundreds of years worth of electrodynamics research, material research. The idea of superconductors is, I think people don't really realize it, but up there with atomic energy was really the game changer. Because otherwise, we will have a very clunky, non-efficient society. We would be running on atomic energy, and a lot of the things that we see today, like the microprocessor, will probably not be a thing. So in terms of producing something, I think, physics has no limitations. Maxwell's equations, when they came out, they were great for understanding, electric fields, magnetic fields, currents. That's great. But now we use them for more than that. We use them for, some of my research uses it to make tides with gravity. So, you really have no bounds. So that's kind of why I love physics. You can produce pretty much whatever you put your mind to. There's literally infinite amount of possibilities.
I like that. Yeah.
You mentioned something so important when you talk about why not build a legacy. There's something called existing and there's another thing called living. And I think a lot of times we get those mixed up. See, people go through life. Some people want to say believe in heaven, some people don't. But I always looked at, and no one's running to die. The natural inclination of the human being is to stay here as long as possible. But you mentioned something that those who worked and leave something behind that is utilized for generations and generations, never die. And I think that's something as youth in this time, and just in general, but particularly us, we have to understand that YOLO concept is real.
It's real.
When you understand that when you leave something behind for your family and your generations, your fellow man to take and move forward, you have really seriously impacted the world in a way that benefits down the line of time. And I think it's so wonderful that you have that in your mind, coming from where you come from, and you highlighted the impact of the you coming out being an immigrant, like that physical, the impact that physics has on your mind, the critical thinking, the rational thought, and the want based on where you come from and what you've been able to accomplish, and just realize how you want to move that forward. So I think for those listening or those watching, think about what it is that, I guess, your purpose is. Think about what it is that you can leave behind so that society not only knows you, but society is better for the life that you live. You know, not just you existing and kind of sucking up air. Not to say that I'm saying that people are useless, but that there's never going to be another you. Point blank, period. The universe has a funny way of not producing anyone alike, similar to snowflakes, right? You can have a twin, but y'all aren't the same. So what can you leave behind that says, my name is Jabril Muhammad, or that says this was Tariq Muhammad, so, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's something to really think about and ponder, that we're here for a reason, and we can be here for a reason bigger than what we may be living at any current time. So,
I mean, definitely. I guess my sort of branch is to, yes, there is a reason, but that reason is not predetermined. Whatever you want to be, listen, like, for example, nothing from my background screams scientist. Between my mom and dad, they might have a high school education equivalent. And I mean, if you really stretch it. So nothing about me says physicist. Nothing about me says scientist. I am not, I don't think of myself as naturally good at math or physics or anything that I do nowadays. There are some things I'm good at, but because, this is backed by science, a lot of the, psychological and mental, qualities that people have are highly, highly malleable. So yes, you might be good at blank. That doesn't stop you from going into something completely different. Hell, one of the things that I pride myself in being really good at, and, as evidenced by my Ivy League degree, is that I'm really good at finessing. Or at least I think I am. That doesn't necessarily translate immediately to a scientist. But when you're a physicist and you're trying to say, hey, look at my convoluted theory, this is the right convoluted theory versus convoluted theory over here. A lot of that is showmanship. A lot of that is selling it. A lot of that is saying, I am right, and here's why I'm right. If you're shy, if you're removed, this is why I'm right. No, you really have to sell it and, make it seem like it's the best thing ever. And I think that's just one instance of, having fine, if you want to say you were born with certain qualities, fine, I may concede that to you. Doesn't mean anything. You can take those qualities and turn them into whatever you want. There's no physics gene. There's nothing that says gene about a certain ethnic group or anything. Anyone who thinks that it's about black versus white, or or it's brown versus white, or any color versus any color, really needs to leave that mentality back in the 19th century, because it's, in my opinion, honestly, nowadays it's more and more about money. It's resources you have at your disposal. I think, like I said, one of the main pillars of my life is to show that I am not special by any stretch of the word, and that anyone, absolutely any idiot, can go and become a physicist.
Right. And that's very key too, being able to be humble enough to say it, okay, I can do this, but so can someone else, and so can I'm not the only one that can go out and cure cancer. That particular thing doesn't belong to me. What belongs to me is my will, my tenaciousness, my ability to go out and do something rather than what I did. You know, so I admire your humility. That's very important as it relates to science, because there are some cocky, arrogant scientists out there, you know, that really, some of them deserve to just have everything just, you know, snatched off, or whatever they think that they are, you know. So I want to commend you for that wholeheartedly. I want to talk about the clearness of science,
Sure.
how clear it should be. When we were texting earlier, I asked you what should I put on the advertisement right under your name, and you said something very important. How sometimes, based on, there are so many programs in a degree, or what have you, that it may be a little confusing to pinpoint what exactly it is that you are or a student of. So how important is it for science to be clear, so that other people can be able to actually, you know, say, okay, I can learn this, I can be a part of this. How important is it for it to be a clear, concise picture?
I think, well, if you don't want to take my word for it, you can take, probably Einstein's word for it, who said that, physics should be as simple as possible, but not a hair simpler. And I think that's really the important part of creating. Well, I can't speak for biology or the other areas, but in terms of math and physics, you really want your theory to be as simple as possible, because the more things you tack on, the more convoluted you make it, the more special cases you refine it to, the more likely you're making stuff up. I mean, you might not be making stuff up. You might be onto something. Who knows? But in terms of simplicity, it has to be simple, because the world you sort of see is somewhat simple. So one example I usually give is one out of one of my gravity textbooks is that, there's a lot of people working in modified versions of gravity. Old school gravity is great, produces great results, gives more or less what we want. But there's a lot of people who say, well, we need to eventually bridge it with this other field. That's fine. But the author takes time to say, you know what, you might go on to study gravity, you might not. But if you do, whatever convoluted theory you cook up with, it needs to boil down to Newton's law. Whatever, you can have a 20-page explanation of your theory, that's fine. If it doesn't boil down to, the usual Newton's equation, probably there's something wrong. And I think that's honestly what makes Einstein and other scientists like him so iconic, is because they took something that when you really study it, it's a very, very complex. I guess if you're a physicist, it might not be as complex. But if you just look at the simplest version of his theories, they produce the right results. They give us what we want. But the beauty lies not in what they produce, is how simply they produce them. You can cook up gravity. You can cook up Einstein's equations of motion from a math perspective. I know I had like three members of my thesis committee who they worked in starting gravity from very mathy terms. And that's great. That's awesome. But a lot of simplicity is lost in that. And, one of my personal thesis advisor, whenever he used to talk about, gravity or any physics theory, he says, you really want to introduce, complexity only when necessary. If you can, keep it as simple for as long as you can. If you don't, great. 5 savants will read your paper. That's great. Awesome. I think one of my Uber drivers last semester has a physics PhD. That may be a bad sign for me. But, his paper is really hidden in archive. I am one of the few people who read it. Not saying that his theory is bad, but that's an example of, how important it is to make your theory as transparent, as palpable as possible.
Nice. As palpable as possible. That's a beautiful way to put it. Man, this is so cool, because I've watched, I remember one time I was in high school, and this a civil engineer came to speak to the students, and he was speaking to a class full of me. I think this was maybe 10th grade. So we're pretty much 10th graders here. Most of us were. And he came into the classroom. First of all, I think one of the things that kind of turned a lot of us off was that he didn't really resemble us, so to speak. And another thing was that he was speaking a lot of big words and terminology that none of us at that time understood. So a lot. He pretty much lost an entire 10th grade, audience because he could not translate what he was saying to the language of the audience he was speaking in front of. I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you were speaking to somebody that knows nothing about science? Have you been in a situation where, okay, I'm telling them about what I study or what I'm interested in, but they're not understanding me? Did you use that as a lesson to kind of soften up your terminology a little bit?
Well, I've had experiences in both. I've talked to people as a person who knew nothing about science at the time, and the other individual was extremely well versed, or at least at that time, to me, they seemed very well versed in their field. And I've also been in the other end. I mean, I have a family who I really have to spend like an hour just trying to get them to understand, okay, this is more or less what I'm doing. So, and people will tell you nowadays, no one's better at downplaying or, I guess, trivializing what they do than me. I can, turn 30-page papers into and say, look, this is all I'm doing. I'm trying to connect this with that to get this. That's the end all and the be all. So, but I've also been in those situations where I'm like, I really need to figure out. I can explain to people what I do, and that's great. But I'm eventually going to be faced with the question of, okay, so what? So that's great that you're working in that. So what? But then it makes me go back and say, what? Why am I doing this? Well, what is, it's really easy to get lost in the weeds, especially when you're doing, a PhD or a master's, to, be so focused in whatever the hell you're doing that you're like, wait, what am I trying to get out of this? Other than just get this line to equal this line. I think that's a key skill that scientists need to develop. Is that's great. What you're doing is awesome. Great that your community can understand it. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you're faced with a so what. You might not be faced with a so what from your peers who they know why, but they may be. You may get a so what from like your grant manager or from the U.S. government, whoever funds you. I mean, they're gonna want to know so what. So I guess if you're not well versed in that, well, you really do need to.
Right. Jabril?
We talk about a lot of. We had a guest on the show that talked about people getting PhDs and, for lack of a better word, not really deserving them because the general premise behind a PhD is you do something novel, right? You venture out into an area that has yet to really be studied and massaged, right? So you really mentioned being able to not only do research, but do research that's consequential in what you can explain it and really understand its impact. And when you look going forward in terms of what you've been able to do, what you're doing now, and your ultimate goal, where does physics bring you over the next few years, and where do you see your impact really being? Is it like you said, you mentioned legacy, but like, what does that really look like for you? Like, if you're walking down the street, how are people remembering you? Is it an equation? And obviously, this is a lot of thought, but is it an equation? Is it like an initiative of some sort? Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it a fund? What are some of the things you've thought about in terms of like that legacy?
I mean, well, my, I guess, selfish reason for getting a PhD is to eventually get into academia, be that professor who hopefully comes up with some sort of equation or theory. But I have made peace with the fact that may not occur. As I said, that there's nothing special about me. Knife cuts both ways. So maybe if I can do it, maybe someone else, maybe one of my students might, one of my siblings might. Either way, I built the road that they eventually went on.
Right.
They might have went on and found the Holy Grail. That's great, and kudos to them. So I kind of just want some fruit. I don't care if it's from me. I don't care if I don't get it. But as long as someone I helped, or as long as my work helps someone find it, I don't care. I mean, there's a very non-negligible possibility that what I'm doing is complete nonsense, and that this may not be the correct theory of gravity. That's fine. At least we know that this is not the way to go. And someone can say, well, at least they did that, and I know that it's not the right idea. And history is filled with people who built their theories out of that. That's definitely not right. So let me go back and see what is right. So as far as what that looks like, I have no idea. All I can say is that I do want it. I do want my work, whether it's the right idea or the wrong idea, to be a catalyst in some way. I don't care if it's the silver bullet. I don't care if someone digs up my paper 20 years from now and says, "Oh, this guy was onto something." Just making sure that I had some role to play in that, holy grail moment.
Nice. We're coming towards the end of the show, and I can definitely say that I'm very satisfied. I'm always satisfied, with the guests that we have on the show. But I just want to acknowledge that I'm very satisfied with how this conversation is turning out. Because like I said before, this is the first time we're having someone in physics on the show. It's very I think to be honest with you, physics is a little underrepresented in those who are interested in STEM. People usually go for the tech stuff or the biologies or the chems, but not too many go for the physics. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Physics is kind of when you look at the selections for like say for example, you were giving a bunch of students a choice to pick whatever STEM industry they wanted to. Physics, at least to me, whenever I was talking around students that were interested in STEM, it wasn't something that, okay, hey, I'm gonna go for physics, or I'm gonna do physics, or something like that. So I just want to say again, great job, man. You're doing a wonderful job representing the love for physics and what it should really be about, in terms of that particular area of science. Let's talk about your mentors.
Sure.
I know you mentioned one of them in your bio. Tell us more about him and or about any mentor that has helped you in your life so far.
Sure. I do want to. I wish I had enough time to mention all of them, but I can think of a couple. One of them being one of my high school calculus teachers. Whatever you may think about Teach for America, this particular individual worked for them, and say what you want about the organization, I really wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for that particular individual. Because I'm not going to say that I always wanted to go to an Ivy League school. No, when I got into Dartmouth, I had only known about it for like maybe half a year, if that. I wanted to go to like the University of Florida. I know I didn't want to stay in Mississippi because, God, I hate that state. But I did know that I wanted to go somewhere else. I wanted something new, something not the usual.
Right.
And he was like, you should really go into these schools. And I'm like, I don't know. Don't think they'll let me in. Usually not. I'm not their sort of breed. If you get what I'm saying. He's like, no, like do it. He saw someone who. I wasn't always as ambitious. He saw someone who had a little bit of ambition and was able to say, no, like you need to, why not you? Like, why wouldn't they accept you? Sure, there's a lot of reasons for why you you don't want to apply, but why not you? In the words of Kanye West, like why not me? Like,
right.
Would it be like this? Like I said, pre Make America Great Again, Kanye. One of his interviews was, would it be better if I said I wanted to be a handyman to work with my hands? Nothing against people who go into vocational services, but he really pushed me to be like, no, you should want more. You should really want more. And then when I made it to undergrad, it's hard. A lot of professors, they don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. I can't say that there's a lot of them who come from where I come from, but in terms of academic, I guess support, I had one math instructor whose class I dropped as a sophomore, who I was like, maybe he doesn't think I'm so smart, and rightfully so. I went on to take another class by him, and he eventually became my advisor. And he did a lot to help me work on my thesis. And especially when you're doing math, there's no lab to work in. You sit down, you talk about it, and you argue about why one of you is right and one of you is wrong. And from the physics perspective, I had an Brazilian fellow named Marcelo Gleiser. He was, he had that persona about him where he was very laid back. He was like, yeah, hey, listen, I get it. You're busy, but if you need help, I'm here. Um, and I think a lot of other instructors at my school, they were either too hands-on in the sense that, no, you need to meet these deadlines. You need to make this. You need to get this to work by this point in time. And a lot of them were also MIA. My initial advisor was almost never there. I mean, he would come in once every 2 months and be like, hey, what's new? And that's not really conducive. I mean, it might be conducive to some individuals, but it's not very conducive to my learning style. So they were kind of the ones who guided me along as a student. As far as the physicist, that I look up to, I don't really have one. I'm of the mindset that if you want to look up to someone, they should represent you in some form or the other. And I can't point to a lot of Latin American physicists who come from poverty and say, hey, look, he's my hero. There's not that many. So what I usually encourage other students to do in that sense, where they say, well, I don't have any role models. I'm like, well, be your own. When someone asks you, who's my favorite scientist, be like, I'm my favorite scientist. Not to say you can't get influence from other figures. I mean, I draw a lot of inspiration, as I said, from the Kennedys, from a lot of other non-sciencey people. But when it comes to science, it's hard to point to someone and say they're like me. So point at yourself. Be like, I'm my favorite physicist, or I'm my favorite biologist, or I'm my favorite chemist. I mean, because I guarantee you ask an athlete, who's your favorite athlete? Some of them will say, yeah, this is my favorite athlete. But a lot of them will say, no, I'm my biggest fan. I think that mentality should be more prevalent, especially within the minority community, where it's hard to find a role model.
Nice. Would you consider yourself a trailblazer for the Latin community when it comes to physics?
Not yet. I was raised that counting your accomplishments before you're done is a form of vanity, and
yeah, that's exactly right.
So the way I think about it is, I'm like, talk to me after, or talk to me as I'm about to die, and we'll tally up what I've done, and then we can have a conversation then. But until then, I don't think I deserve that moniker. I think anyone who tries to give themselves the moniker of trailblazer, pioneer, I'm like, great, awesome for giving yourself those accolades. Really, you should really wait until you're done so you can tally up everything that you have accomplished. You haven't. Yes, I've done a lot of things that you don't expect out of an immigrant or out of a person of color. So what? I mean, there's always much more to do. Like, yeah, I did this. Now go be better. My dad's advice was always, go do better. Like, that's great that you did that. And as a kid, that might be hard. Doing really well in school and your dad telling you, oh, that's great, and go do better. But for me, it was the mindset. That's, yeah, yay for me for accomplishing this thing. Now let me go do something better. So one of the questions that I'm asked by my family a lot is, why didn't you celebrate your graduation from undergrad? I mean, I wasn't there. I was like, so what? You're rewarding me for something I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go and get educated. Same with my high school education. I'm like, don't celebrate me for shit that I'm supposed to do. Like, when I do something that's truly novel, truly revolutionary, then congratulate me. But until then, I will hold my praises and the applause.
Okay. Definitely understand where you're coming from on that. Jabril, you have anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Just that it seems like the moral of today's show is to stay humble and stay hungry. At the end of the day, it's always something more to do. I was talking to some of my colleagues at the job today about the longing for me to establish consistency and waking up early day in and day out, regardless if it's the weekend or not. Things that are like arbitrary, like the weekend. Well, who says it's the weekend? You know what I'm saying? Like establishing routine where there's always something to do as a scientist, as a man, as someone who's venturing to get married, as someone who has goals, aspirations. It's always something to do, whether you wake up to go to work, clock in a 9 to 5 or not. So the beauty in what he's saying and talking about is, it's always a grind. There's always something to be done, and the hunger to want to do something that is truly novel, that is truly something that someone can draw from and can benefit people down the line is, yeah, don't celebrate me for what I'm supposed to do. As simply a human being, as one who has a certain requisite knowledge base. But celebrate me when it's really something super consequential. So I definitely understand and can empathize with that. And I also can say there's always time to give yourself that quick pat on the back just to keep yourself motivated. But I'll always, like you said, stay hungry, stay humble, and keep on that path and keep moving forward. So definitely thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Really, sharing some awesome gems for us. So looking forward to working with you in the future.
Likewise.
Just really continue down this path together. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Cool. So one of the things we like to do before we end the show is we like to ask our guests, if a young person, let's see, do you have any siblings?
Yes, two.
Two? They're younger than you?
I'm sorry?
Are they younger than you?
Yes, I'm the oldest.
Okay, cool. How old is your youngest sibling?
Good question. He's going on, he just turned 11.
11. Okay, so if he came up to you and asked you, Louise, I don't know if he may call you something else or something like that, but Louise, what does science mean to you, and why is it important to you as an individual? What would you tell him?
I think he doesn't ask me that, and I give him a different answer every time. But I think the main core of what I tell him is something along the lines of, it's what separates you from your average Joe. And you want to be average, go be average. But that's not something I expect out of us as someone with the last name Martinez. You want to be ignorant, but don't claim our last name. A lot of people, our parents, myself, have worked very hard to do this. So what science and physics in general means to me is, just like this never-ending struggle, journey, call it whatever you want, to just be better, to separate yourself from ignorance, separate yourself from lack of wisdom. Or mental poverty. Like I always use the term mental poverty. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Jabril, what got your week over there, man? You good?
No, I'm straight. Rolando is tuned in. I'll just say that.
Cool. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, man, this has definitely been a very good show. I thoroughly enjoyed your presence. Just kind of reiterating what Jabril said, man, this is a learning episode for all of those who may be watching and kind of getting, a little bit, kind of feeling themselves a little bit. This is something you need to watch to kind of just put into perspective how humility and science go hand in hand. So again, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to working with you in the future. How can people contact you? Or Instagram or anything like that?
You feel free to share my Instagram with whomever is following. I think anyone who's following your Instagram account saw your advertisement earlier. I'm always available via Instagram, most forms of social media. I usually respond to you within the day unless I'm really busy. But I'm always open to questions. I'm always open to any sort of inquiry into what I'm doing is welcomed. It's nice to have someone ask you what you're doing every now and then.
Awesome. Also, real quick, I want to give a shout out to one of the viewers, Ariane Hunter. She made a video, a little photo on Instagram about her watching you on OMSTV. You know Ariane, don't you?
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool. So it feels good when you're seeing past.
This was the connect.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got it. Because like the Dartmouth thing had me tripping. I said,
yeah, I seen that before.
I'm Dartmouth, X, Y, Z. Okay. See, that's how your network works.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see past guests kind of, shout out when they're watching a show or something like that, when they know somebody else that's on the show. As a matter of fact, our last 4 or 5 guests have all been connected in some way. So it's really good to expound on the network that you have. So, Jabril, is there anything you want to say or close us out with?
Is there anything I want to say to close this out? Brother, you know it's coming. This has been another installment of STEM Files on OMSTV. Make sure y'all rewatch, y'all smash that like button, and you share to all your friends, family, cats, dogs, fish, all the above, right? Facebook at OManSci, Twitter and Instagram at OMScientific, Instagram as well at OMS_TV. Strive to bring this to you every week as often as possible. Family, like we talked about everything from gravity to Maxwell's equations to relativity to our personal journeys in science and everything, trying to do the best we can to leave something behind and move forward. And again, leaving us with that humble and hungry aspect. You know, don't reward us for what we've done. And I'm not talking as one who's done a lot, but let's stay motivated to do the things that we need to do to really exact change in our society. You know, those consequential things that allow us to look back, you know what? I lived a full life. You know, I did something that people can look back and say, man, like, you know, not I want to be like him, but I can do those things too, and really serve as a beacon of light for other people. So again, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Really appreciate everything you brought, your energy, your passion. Like I said, looking forward to working with you in the future. Got to give a shout out to Ariane, all those who watch, Rolando Lyles, who is currently studying cancer research, getting his Ph.D. at University of Miami. My best friend from University of Pennsylvania, doing a little bit of stalking me on my Instagram, but it's all good. Thank you so much, Ro. Love you, bro. Love my parents and everybody, but everyone, just keep on listening and everything. We love y'all. Looking forward to more shows in the future. Thank you so much, Luis.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks to everyone who tuned in. This has been another edition of the STEM Files on YouTube, no longer on Blog Talk Radio. I gotta keep plugging that in. But our next guest this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. is, oh man, I cannot believe I forgot our next guest. Well, anyway, don't even pay no attention to that. But our next guest is Adrian Davey. Adrian, I'm not sure if you know him too. Louise, do you know Adrian?
The name does sound familiar. If I saw a picture, maybe.
Gotcha. Okay, so our next guest is Adrian Davey. I believe he's studying chemistry as well. I'm not exactly sure what type, but he will be on our show this coming Saturday at 7:30 p.m. So be sure to tune into that as well. More information about our next guest will be forthcoming. So, as Jabril said, just make sure you follow all our social media handles. And this has been a STEM File. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Peace.
Deuces.